What's going on, guys? We're back. We just got a big shipment of the shock therapy parts in for Buddy's KRX. So let's go inside the shop and see what we've got going on today. It's blistery cold winter here. So this box of goodies just showed up for the KRX. So we're gonna get that baby all the way down there, dialed in on the shocks today. So stay tuned. We'll open this up, see what's inside, and start pulling the shocks off. All right. Let's open this baby up, guys. Well, if you've never ordered from Shock Therapy, now you can tell their packaging is awesome. They're not messing around. Got a couple swag packs because I bring in a lot of their stuff. Caps, nitrogen caps, and Kawasaki springs. There's going to be another set of springs underneath here, but that's what you can expect when you open up a nice package from Shock Therapy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we got the shocks all unboxed, ready to rock and roll. We're over here on this baby here. We're gonna pull the shocks out, bring them up to the room, pull the springs off, drain the nitrogen, pull the caps off, open them up, and we're gonna do D3 internal valving inside these shocks and spring therapy spring kits, dual rate, top and bottom, tenders and mains. He's got plans to, well, we're gonna do the full cage on it, but he also has plans to carry a full-size spare. He carries a toolbox, he carries a cooler, he's got bumpers, he's got a winch. We're doing steel skid plates that I've drawn in CAD, steel rocker guards I've drawn in CAD. They're all out, getting laser cut right now. It's all a prototype. He wanted to do the prototype on them to see how we can do. So they'll be Canadian-made skids and rockers. So there's gonna be a lot of weight on the machine. I spec'd that with Shock Therapy with the springs. So hopefully the whole package, when it's all done, it's gonna ride primo, and it's gonna maintain the nice ride height that we want. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pull these springs and coilovers out. So as you can see, the bottom's really easy to get out. The top's kind of a pain in the you-know-what to get a wrench in the back. And got the wrong size. He did not want that coming loose. So yeah, Mason put the full access UTV plate on the top, and clearly he's got some muscles. Crack the other side loose. Oh yeah, they've got those washers in the back. That's kind of a... How did he get that? What is he... What is going on here, Mason? Oh, that side fits. He's got way too long of bolts in here for some reason. Little magnet, pull that washer out, quick and easy. I don't know why he's got these spacers, and maybe he got the wrong hardware when he ordered the kit. This almost looks like a control arm bolt, not a shock bolt. I wonder what's going on with that. But there's one. This one seems to be hitting on this cross member. Shock brace. Get that other washer. Magnets are your best friend, guys. I don't know why this bolt is hitting on here. A little bit of love. Get it right out of there. No problem. There we go. Oh. Why is that so stuck in there? There we go. All right, guys, so we're up here. Don't mind the mess. We've been crazy busy. No time to clean anything. Need to take a week off. So this is just our spring compressor. It works for the time being. There are nicer ones on the market for sure. Move these springs out of the way. It's hydraulic, so it works good for heavy springs, big struts on trucks, what have you. So I like to just put a little bit of preload on there to hold the shock steady. And then there's the rubber bump stop up inside here. Then you can spin it and push it down on the shaft. You have to get rid of that bump stop because if you don't push it down, you can't get the spring retainer. The spring retainer has to move down around the shaft to get it off. So I push that down. Pump on the shock. Take the spring retainer off. Slowly release it. And there you have it, guys. Both springs are off. Factory springs, not going to need them. We will need the isolator. If anyone has any questions about this, it was super cheap. A couple $100 on Amazon. Nothing crazy. There's some really nice ones out there. Haven't bought one yet. This one does the job. Leave a comment below if you want some information on an Amazon link for that. If you want to change your springs at home without those crazy like threaded rods and impact guns and stuff, this is really safe, really quick. What was that, 10 seconds, the springs are off. Easy peasy. This is going to get a bath now, and then it's going to get disassembled. We'll take the nitrogen out first, open it up, do some magic inside. So I'm just going to go grab the other shock, pull the springs off the other shock, and then we'll take these things apart. So I got the other shock in here. Just gotta push down the bump stop. Pump it up. Take the retaining cup out. Let it down. And ready to go. All right guys, so got the springs off, gave her a quick wipe down. She's clean now. So there's this barcode sticker, you got to get that off of the reservoir. Underneath there, there's a little Torx screw. We're going to remove that Torx screw. I forgot to bring the Torx bit over here, so I'm going to go grab that. But before I do that, the other thing I like to do when I open these up is turn the clicker all the way loose, or soft, whatever you want to call it, same thing. It just helps for bleeding, because you got to bleed the air out when you put the piston back in with the valving to be able to cycle this up and down, and when that's open, there's no restriction, or very little restriction. So just a tip for you at home, if you're going to get into this, just back that off when you're doing all your assembly, and then when you get it back in the car, or rig, or side-by-side UTV, turn the back into your desired click. Personally, on the KRX, with the springs and the valving, I like to run this fully open anyways, unless you're gonna go full send on something, you can tighten her up. But once she's dialed in with that thing all the way open, she parties pretty good. So I'm gonna go grab that tool and I'll be right back. We'll drain the nitrogen, pull this cap out, open this up, pull the guts out. All right guys, so as I was saying, take this screw out. I already took it out, but we're gonna do it again because I was missing tools and I didn't want to keep running back and forth, get more tools. When you take this out, your nitrogen is gonna leak out. These are common, this little O-ring here, it leaks and then you lose nitrogen. I personally think that's a bigger issue than the tender springs. I think a lot of these KRXs are losing nitrogen charge, and then when you lose that charge, that puts a pressure on the shock itself, which helps extend the shock, which actually helps the spring. So people think that the tender is really weak, but actually there's probably almost no nitrogen left in your shock, making it sag even more than a soft tender spring. My wife Mel's KRX is still on factory springs. I modified these to put a Schrader valve in them. You can drill and tap and put a valve and put the correct nitrogen, and it's not going to leak out of the little O-ring. She has not had an issue yet. 1,000 kilometers on them. Maintaining 16-inch ground clearance on 35-inch tires. All is good in that neck of the woods. So now you gotta take some little picks and pull a little snap ring out. Little snap ring. Then you can take some round nose picks and you can pull up on this cover. A little bit of massaging it. She comes right out. Easy as that. Take a rag to wipe all the little dust and dirt away. Clean her up. Then I always do a visual inside. This is where your IFP is. IFP is internal floating piston. So there's a wear band, an O-ring, and a disc. And it separates your nitrogen charge from your oil. Not only does it separate, the IFP is moving. As this shaft goes into the shock, it takes up volume where your oil is. It's displacement of the diameter of this shaft. So as that goes in, that oil needs to go somewhere, or this would hydrolock. So it pushes on the nitrogen charge and on the IFP. So it's an exponential rate, which is part of tuning, because as you squish that, it's pushing back on the oil, which is pushing out on the displacement of the shaft, helping with compression. So changing the depth of that to a degree without it hydrolocking, there's a lot involved. But always check in there, make sure there's not oil on this side of the IFP. If oil's bypassing that, then you clearly need to pull that apart, check the wear band, check the O-ring. A lot of times the O-ring can wear out the IFP and put grooves in it, and it'll leak past. So it's just some things to check. There's tools with there's a threaded hole in the middle, and you can thread them in and you can pop those out, or just take it to a shop that has the tools to do it. But that's what's inside the reservoir. That's the technology behind it. The oil is going back and forth. The IFP is moving to take up the displacement of this shaft. So now that that is out, we're gonna pull the shock apart. All right, so we're gonna open up the shock, just tap this dust cover. Doesn't take much at all. It's just kind of chilling there. Work your way around it. Popped her off, easy peasy. So this is usually full of dirt. I'm gonna go grab electrical tape, because I like to just wrap this with electrical tape to hold it up out of the way. All right, just tape this up quick. It's just kind of a pain. It's always falling down, getting in your way. And then, just like on the reservoir cap, there's gonna be a snap ring inside here. So if you just push down on the seal head, you can pop out that snap ring. This one's being a little bit of a bitch. There we go. Get all the dirt off of it. And then you got to pull the guts out. I find that's usually easiest by standing up on the bench. And if you pull it out too quick, you'll spill a lot of the oil. So just take your time. Slowly lift it out. Now this machine only had 300 kilometers on it, so these don't need a full service. They've still got, you'll see break-in assembly grease in here, and they're like brand new. Knocking stuff over. So they're in super good shape. So that's the internals. It just needs valving, bleed and valving. So we can talk about this here now. So this is the rebound top out spring. So a lot of guys say you need the limit straps so that you're not damaging the internals. And yeah, that's true. Limit straps do help for the internals. But on these side by sides, I I don't know. You'd have to have some big heavy tires for this not to help do its job, because basically when this thing comes out, the piston's going to bottom out against the seal head, and the only thing holding all these guts inside is this little snap ring sitting against the seal head, so it's smashing against that. This helps the last little bit of full extension to slow it down. And then you've got your piston, and then you've got your rebound valving and your compression valving. So everybody's got their own valving. I'm not going to tell you how to do your valving stack. I'm not going to show you what I'm putting on the valving stack. I'm just going to show you how to do it, and you can go wherever you want to get it done and put whatever valving that you see fit inside. That is the inside of your shock on your KRX. This is the front. They've got really nice high flow pistons in this design. It's actually a really nice setup. Just the stock valving sucks. So we're going to fix that up. All right. So we got the shock internals in the vise here. It's a 1/2 inch thread or 3/4 nut to hold the shock on. Pull that baby off. Grab all your goodies. Put them down on the table. And then this you don't really need to do anything with. So now I like to set these out, lay them out how they are in order for rebound and for compression. And then once you have everything laid out, you can figure out what your changes are that you want to make. Put it back together. And that is how you valve your shocks. Okay guys, there's one other thing I really wanted to show you that no one really talks about. This face shim is a bleed shim. See how there's these two grooves. Those grooves have to line up with this piston. I don't know if this camera will show it. Likely not. But anyways, they have to line up because it lets a little bit of oil bleed through those two grooves. So if you're working on your shocks and you spin this piston and don't line up those grooves, if it's running a bleed shim, then you're gonna lose that little bit of, like the little tiny bumps, the little tiny chop, like rocks and pebbles, where the shaft is only moving like a 1/2 inch or so. It bleeds freely through those little grooves, but then when you start to hit the big stuff, the shims all start to deflect. So tip for you guys at home, make sure you line that up when you tighten all this down so that those ports are open and able to bleed. All right guys, so we got the coilover all back together. We got the snap rings back in. We got the new cap. So the final stage is to put the nitrogen in. So you have to use these, it's called the zero loss gauge when you're doing this. You can't just use like a tire chuck, because this thread's on, but then it has a needle that goes down in to put the nitrogen in. So if you've never done that before, that probably looks new to you. If you've done it multiple times, then don't worry about it. The other style of shocks would be, there'd be like a rubber grommet with a needle that goes through. So I've got a couple different setups on this tank. Tank is just nitrogen. So we're gonna set this at 180 to start. I like that for the cowies. And then thread in the zero loss. Open up, check to make sure. Yeah, 180. Just snug that up. Couldn't go too tight with no nitrogen because the whole cap would spin. So now it's not leaking anymore. You know, it's good. turn that off. Turn off this zero loss, and then crack it loose, take it off, and then I push up and down on the shock a few times before I put the springs on, just to make sure everything's hunky-dory. So that's the final stage, and then this is going back on that brand new 2023 KRX Trail Edition. All right, guys, so we got all the shocks done on this KRX right here. So I just want to go over a couple last things about the final setup adjustments and whatnot when you're doing this. So you'll see a lot of people on the internet talking about adjusting their preload up here and adjusting these crossover rings, which I did mention and talk a little bit about previously, and also where the springs are sitting. So let's go down the list. We'll start with where the springs are sitting. Where the spring ends, you see the last cut of the spring, you want to have the two springs opposite to each other to help with deflection on this slider. So as you can see, this one ends here, the other one is around on the back side. So that's your ideal situation on the slider. They're going to move as you drive, but that's a good place to set them up when you're putting your new springs on. And then your crossover, I talked about previously, within 1 to 2.5 or 3 inches above the slider at ride height. So you can move this depending on if it's bucking or how much weight you have and if it's contacting too early. This is easily adjustable on the fly. Just keep a screwdriver, a chisel, and a hammer in your rig when you're out doing your testing, and you can change that while you're out on the trail. Now, the final thing is going to be your preload. And a lot of guys are gonna give out numbers and measurements online for that preload, but what a lot of people aren't accounting for is they're measuring it with nothing in the vehicle, and that's kind of not right. So I put a base setting on this rig because none of his stuff is here yet, but we're putting a new cage, which is going to be about 70 pounds heavier. He's got a whole bunch of cargo stuff in the back. He's going to have a spare tire in the back. And you also want both your riders in it. If you always ride with 2 people, then you're going to want to have both people in the vehicle when you're setting your preload. It's just like a dirt bike or a snowmobile or whatever. You want to have the sit-in or the squat. So when you get out of it, yeah, it's going to lift up, it's going to extend, unless you have way too much valving and the thing is stiff as shit. But when you get out of this thing, it's going to sit higher. Say it sits 17 inches or 16 inches without anyone in it on stock tires. And then when you load it all up with the correct preload, it goes down to 15 or 14 and a half. These are just ballpark numbers. These aren't exact numbers. I'm just giving you an example that you don't set the preload on these things without all the weight in it. And all of this should, if you care enough, should be fine-tuned. So if you change and all of a sudden you're not running stuff in the back and a spare, take the 2 minutes and thread the preload out and change it for what you're doing. It's pretty important if you care a lot about the suspension ride. If you're not that picky and you're not that into it, then just set it and forget it. So he's got the new stickers on there, the new valving, the new springs, the new nitrogen cap. So he got everything. He got the whole package. I left all the clickers fully open, fully loose for now, soft, I guess. And like I said, we're gonna have his packets in here fully loaded with all his gear, a cooler with ice and some drinks of his choice. I think he's gonna run a spare tire on above those or something. The new cage, the aluminum roof, so all of that has to go on, and I need him and a passenger sitting in it, and then we'll do our final setup for this, do a bit of testing around the yard here and hit a couple bumps and jumps, and then I would call it good to go, as long as he's happy with the way it rides. But it came out really nice. They look good. So now we're waiting on parts, laser cut for the rocker guards and the skid plates. It's all going to come out of steel. He wanted steel, so again, that's going to add more weight. So the preload really means nothing right now. And while we're waiting on all that, I'm going to start pulling this factory cage out, and then I have all the new bars here cut. So they have to go over to the CNC bender, and we're going to start bending them up and notching them and build this thing a nice sleek new cage. We're going to drop it, I think it was 3 inches in my notes, because he's a taller guy and he needs a couple inches of clearance for his helmet, so it's not going to be a crazy drop, but it's really going to make the machine look a lot better. So yeah, stay tuned for episode 2. doing the roll cage stuff, and then get the skids and stuff put on, and we'll do a final video walk around and have him come and rip it around. Stay tuned. All right, so I thought I was done this video, and I just had to add this in at the end because I also see a lot of this on the internet. So this is the Trail Edition. It has a performance series, which you can see on the bottom of the shock here, with a clicker on the top of the reservoir. Now the other option on multiple side-by-sides would be the live valve or dynamic suspension. So instead of having a manual clicker on the top of this resi, it has an electronic, it's basically a solenoid, a metering solenoid. So it applies 0 to 12 volts to open and close. This one is manual. You gotta turn it by hand and it's 20 clicks or something, whatever it is. So a lot of people think that, well, when you get the live valve, it's changing all your valving for you and it's making this thing, I don't know, a fairy tale. But at the end of the day, the live valve, it is tied into a gyro and your throttle position and your steering angle. Now, I don't know if all of the side-by-sides are that way. Some of them might just have dynamic suspension where it's soft, medium, firm, but the actual live valve is tied into those sensors. So basically, it's this exact same system with the clicker, but being tied into those sensors. When you mash the throttle and the weight transfers to the back of the car, the computer knows that, and it's going to change the voltage going to that metering valve, and it's going to close this valve, not allowing the displacement, which I talked about earlier, from this chrome piston shaft going inside the shock. The oil has to go somewhere. It has to go into the reservoir. So by slowing that down, it stiffens the shock, or opening it up, allowing that to go in, it softens the shock. So when you turn the wheel to the driver's side, the computer knows that, and it can close the two passenger side shocks, not allowing the displacement of that oil to pass as freely. Same with the gyro going up the hills and stuff. So there are some benefits to it, but most people that I know don't own those vehicles. They all have just a regular clicker. I have one buddy with a Polaris that has the live valve, and he does play with the buttons for sure. But on these Cowies, I can tell you, when they're valved and sprung and this thing's dialed in, I could ride all day, from rock crawling to high-speed hydro lines, gravel roads, ditch banging, whatever, you name it. I never get out and change that clicker. That thing is dialed. Even jumping it, if you're really gonna send it, you might go in 5 or 6 clicks to slow it down a little bit. But all you're really doing is changing how much oil can go from inside the shock body and displace into this reservoir. So there's a whole lot of misinformation on what that live valve is doing. There's going to be places for it. I personally think it's more suited for something that's a dual purpose. So if you drive on the street a lot, well, there's really no bumps on the street, just small stuff, and you want it to be really plush and really soft for your daily driving, and it's an awesome, comfy ride. But then you want to go out on the weekend with your buddies and smash through the trails. You want to stiffen it up so it doesn't just bottom out on you. But on a toy like this, it's always off-road, really. So I guess if you really wanted to make it really soft for rock crawling and stiffen it up if you're sending it through the whoops, you could. I haven't personally seen that with all of the different rigs that I've done tuning on, that just getting out and turning that clicker in the odd case where you want to change it, you can. But I just wanted to touch base because there's a lot of misinformation on that, on how that works with the sensors, the voltage, the oil, and everything going through it. That's my take on it, my opinion on how it works and what I've seen. So I hope that helps you guys kind of wrap your head around if you want to spend the extra. It's like $1,200 or something for an ES model, or just get the regular trail or special edition. Yeah, not really sure if it's worth it or not, but maybe you have a different experience and you can tell me based on what you've learned down in the comments, so we can all learn from that together as a community. So yeah, just wanted to touch base on that.